possessions have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and surely he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on this person. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. You know, when you're a specially chosen vessel, when you follow the Lord with all your heart and mind, you put a big target on your back. And, you know, the problem is we worry about the target more than what our goal is. And it's easy to do because we're on this earth. We are from this. We are created from the ground here beneath us. We are not all-powerful. We know we have a finite lifespan. We try to protect ourselves. There was a guy, and I'll think of his name in a little bit. He was in the Army. He was a medic. He was a conscientious objector in World War II, and on Iwo Jima, he saved between 50 and 85 or 90 people, and he ended up getting Desmond Hobbs. I knew I'd remember. Is that right? Hobbs? Say again? Das. See, I knew I'd remember. But you know what? He was a follower of God. He did not worry about the target on his back at all. He rescued those people, and he got to be such a part of his unit that they would not go anywhere without him. They waited until he would have prayer before they went. They would not go on the Sabbath because he would not be with them, and so they would not go. To those people, he became the symbol of Jesus. Isn't that amazing? And before that, they had shunned him, they had made fun of him, they had, physically messed with him, and yet, when the chips were down, who did they turn to? Would it not be amazing to have people around you think of you like that? And actually, with some of you, they do. Have you considered my servant? The story of Joseph, we know it. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojourning in the land of Canaan, and these are his generations, and Joseph was the youngest son. And it goes on to tell about him and how his brothers were very jealous of him. First off, his father gave him this really nice robe, and all of them, didn't have that. And how his father preferred his company because he was his favorite son, the child of his old age, the son of his favorite wife. And they hated him. And then he told them about their dreams, or his dreams. And they disliked him even more. And, when the sheaves of grain, they were being cut, and his sheaf stood up, and all the others bowed to them. They didn't like that at all. And then later on, he tells them about another dream, the moon and the stars that are bowing down before him. And they really, really took offense at that. And so they decided that they were going to do something about that. He had the target on his back from his own family. And so his father sent him to find his brothers and see how they were doing and probably take him a couple things. And so he went. And when he got there to where they were supposed to be, they were gone. And he's wandering around, and somebody finds him and says, "What are you looking for?" And he said, "My brothers and their flocks." And they said, "Oh, they went over there." So he goes. And when they see him coming from afar, it's anybody ever tried to hide a rainbow? That's kind of the impression I get of the coat, a rainbow. So he's walking around in this rainbow, and they see him from afar, and they said, this is our chance to do something about this. Let's kill him. I hate him so much, I want him dead. Isn't that a sad thing? I mean, there was times I wanted to beat my brothers up, but I didn't want to kill them. And so they come up with a plan. They're going to, gang up on him and do something really dastardly to him. But one of them says, no, let's throw him in this pit. And it actually sounds more like it was a well because there was no water in it, they said. So they throw him in there. And then Reuben is planning to come back and pull him out later. But they see this caravan coming by of slavers, and they sell him to him for 20 pieces of silver. The family's not worth very much, is it? 20 pieces of silver. And so he ends up in Egypt, and he's bought by the captain of Pharaoh's guard. And we know that story pretty well. He goes on, he becomes, just makes the captain of the guard just extremely wealthy. In fact, it gets to the point where he doesn't know what he owns. The only thing he knows is that the food in front of him is his. He's got so much stuff he doesn't worry about it anymore. And Joseph is in charge of all of it. And then Potiphar's wife, the captain's wife, says some untrue things, and he ends up in prison. But you know what? God is still with him even in prison. The walls of the prison can't keep God out. So he rises through the ranks, and pretty soon he's the trustee. And in fact, he's actually running the jail. Every now and then they check with him, it sounds like, but he's actually running everything there. And then they bring in the baker and the cupbearer. And they have dreams. He tells them what their dreams are going to be. And it comes to pass. And Joseph says to the cupbearer, he says, remember me when you're holding Pharaoh's cup, or something like that. And the guy says, sure. But you know what? He's kind of like me. He's got a memory about that long on a good day. And so he forgets, and time goes by, and Pharaoh has this dream. There's 3 beautiful cows. They're fat and happy, grazing, and then there's 3 other skinny, scrawny cows come, and I'm sorry, 3 or 7? Is it 7? Say it louder so I can hear. 7, okay. 7. 7 cows. And they come up, and the fat cows, and then there's the 7 scrawny cows that come up and eat these cows, and they're still as skinny as they were before. And then the same thing with the ears of corn. The same thing happens, and Pharaoh is just puzzled. He can't figure it out. He talks to his wise man. He talks to everybody, and the cupbearer standing there to him when he's doing this other stuff and talking to people, and finally it clicks. Joseph, hey, I can get a reward out of this. So, he tells him about Joseph and how he told him the dreams. And so, through the interpretation of the dream, Joseph is appointed basically vice pharaoh over everything in the land. And he starts storing up the grain and everything else, and a big chunk of everything goes into the pharaoh's granaries. And one thing that's kind of interesting, there's a video that's called the Exodus, and it's about this time in history. One thing that most people don't know is that there wasn't just one pharaoh in the land. There was a whole bunch of little pharaohs all over. But after the famine, during the famine, everybody came to buy grain for him from the pharaoh that Joseph was working for. And that's how he ended up becoming the pharaoh, the only pharaoh after that time frame. And so Joseph's family during this famine came to Egypt to buy grain. And they forgot all about Joseph. They told their father that he had been killed by a wild animal, and they provided the robe. And then Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother, became his favorite. And so he sent the brothers, all except for Benjamin, to Egypt to buy the grain. And it always puzzles me how they go. They must have, I don't see 11 brothers with 11 donkeys. That's not going to feed a family for very long. I want to know that. But they go there and they buy grain. And he calls them spies at first. And it's just a very interesting story. But you need to read it. And then you can remember if it was 3 or if it was 7. But Joseph was put under a lot of stress for a lot of time. From before he left his father's house till when he was in the captain of the Pharaoh's guards, when he was working for Pharaoh. Do you think it was all easy for him? I don't think any of it was easy for him. He missed his family and his father? Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about somebody else here, a guy named Nehemiah. Anybody ever heard of him? What is Nehemiah known for? Rebuilding Jerusalem. Okay, he was a cupbearer to the king. Cupbearers led a very, very nice life. They had to be around the king, but when the king wasn't doing something, they could probably go do what they wanted, because they were very high to the king. Anyway, let me read this. The words of Nehemiah. Now it happened that in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the citadel, that, Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped and who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnants in the province who have survived, let me start all over again. The remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. He doesn't seem to be having a very good afternoon either, does he? So what does he do? Does he continue mourning? He gets up and he does something. The king notices that he's kind of sad, and he asks him about it. And he asks for permission to go do this, go build the walls, rebuild the city. And the king says, yeah, go ahead. And he gives him money, and he gives him an army to protect him and through hostile territory. And then when he gets down there, guess what? There's a lot more people that don't want Jerusalem to be rebuilt. Anybody ever hear of a guy named Jonah? I like Jonah. He kind of reminds me of me. I don't mind running away. In fact, I tried to get a hold of Jim because I've been having back spasms. And I don't really know when they're going to happen until they do. But I took a Flexerol this morning, so hopefully I'm okay. But I tried to get a hold of Jim to see if he could swap with me, and then he never got back to me. And then this morning I realized that he's not here. I don't like to give short notice, but in this case I was kind of hoping that I could. And I don't know that Jim has a lot of information already prepared, so I wouldn't have minded having him do that, but I didn't want to do that to anybody else. Jonah was given a message: go to the city of Nineveh and preach against them and tell them that the Lord is going to destroy them if they don't change their ways. And so he goes over there. He tries to run away first. He gets in a boat, and the oceans come up, and they're tossed and turned, and the people are all throwing all the cargo overboard. And I in my mind's eye, I see this. Okay, this is just my mind's eye. I don't know what happened there. I don't see all the oceans around them being tossed. I just see this ship being tossed. And everybody, a mile away is fine. And they're just kind of looking at what's going on here because this is really weird. And so this ship is throwing everything that they can overboard. And the captain says, go down and look and see if there's anything else down there that we can get rid of. But before that, he told all the people on the ship to pray to their gods. And somebody goes down there, and here's Jonah asleep. And they shake him and wake him up. Hey, we're going to die. And Jonah gets up and yawns. And he says, what? And he says, can't you feel the ship tossing and turning? Well, yeah, but I thought it was just kind of a little bit rough ride. The captain wants you up on the deck, and the captain says to everybody there that's assembled, he says, why is this happening to us? Because you look a mile off. From my point of view, because I wasn't there, I'm just kind of the way I run it in my mind. A mile off, everybody's fine. It's only there where their ship is that it's just, the reverse of Niagara Falls is probably a good way of phrasing it. And the ship is just, and everybody's hanging on, and they go to walk. They're walking real slow uphill, and then they're running, and they're trying to grab something before they fall off the end of the ship. And the captain says, who among you has upset the gods? And Jonah's there. And he says, what did you do? And he says, my God told me to go, my God, the God of the Israelites, told me to go here. And he says, what can we do to fix this? What can we do to fix this? How can we do this? And he says, well, if you just throw me overboard, I'm sure everything will be fine. And these guys are sailors. They're men. They've run into rough stuff before. They're not going to just give up at the first sign of trouble. But after about 5 more minutes, the captain says, your life be on you, and they throw him overboard. And then it's like, boom, somebody put a piece of glass down, and a great big piece of glass down, and the waters are stilled again. And Jonah's out there in the water. He's trying to crawl up on this drum, this keg, and he can't because it's round. So he's looking around for something to hang on to. And everybody on the ship, everybody that's been watching this, sees that as soon as Jonah's backside touched the water and started to go splash, it went like a mirror. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. But this is what I see in my mind. And everybody's going around Jonah. Nobody's going to pick him up because they've been watching this whole scene going on. And Jonah's floating around there. He's trying to crawl up on this, and it doesn't work. He's trying to crawl up on that. It doesn't work. Finally, he gives up and says, basically, Lord, into your hands I commit my soul, and whatever you want me to do, I will do it. If you want me to go down here and drown and die, it's all on you, Lord, whatever you want. I give myself to you. And so he goes down, bubbles floating up. And he kind of gets in the fetal position, and he goes to sleep. Okay? The next thing he knows is that he's being thrown cold seawater on. And he reeks. He's been in the belly of a whale for how long? How long was Jesus in the tomb? 3 days and 3 nights, right? So I did get my 3s from somewhere. But anyhow, you know the rest of the story about Jonah. Was he God's servant? Yeah. He went and he preached and he converted thousands. But did he still have a thorny attitude? Yeah. He didn't do it willingly. He said, God, if that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. So he goes over there and he says something similar to this. Great news, everybody. God's going to have a weenie roast, and you're all invited. There's one little bit of bad news, though. You're the weenies. And, you know, it might have changed as a little bit of time went on, but he was not happy to be there. He wanted them to be destroyed because they were very oppressive to anybody that came anywhere near them. Who else is a good servant of God? Do you ever hear of a fellow named John the Baptist? Ever hear of someone named Jesus? Ever hear of a guy named Paul? People who went and served the Lord. Consider thy servant. I'm going to talk about somebody that most of you probably never met today. His name was John B. Alder. He was in the army up here in, I think they sent him up in 67. He didn't want to be infantry. He was pretty tall. He was about 6'5", and he figured he'd be a pretty good sized target if he went to Vietnam. So he looked around to see what was available, and this thing, they had these early like tow missiles, and they had wires that ran out with them, and he decided to become a technician for those things. It took 2 years to go through the school, okay? And there was a lot of electronic work, a lot of soldering, a lot of, you know, reading ohms, and I mean, just all sorts of stuff for those. And it took 2 years to go through the course. And then after you graduated from the course, you could pick where you wanted to go. And so he wanted Germany, he wanted Europe somewhere, and the Army sent him to Alaska. I can understand that because the same thing happened to me. So he got up here, and he was in the Army. His dad wasn't really a believer, and his mom was, but you know, that kind of got pushed down a little bit because his dad wasn't. His dad had been in World War II. He was a major, and when he came back, he brought back a bunch of stuff with him. In fact, he brought back enough stuff that they were able to sell the stuff that he brought back. There was German Lugers, German rifles, all sorts of stuff that he brought back. Because he was a major, he could bring back a whole lot of stuff. And he did. And when he sold the stuff, he was, stamps too. He was really into stamps. And they were able to sell a lot of this stuff, not all of it, and build a house. So when John got up here, he would run around with his buddies, and actually, let me take a step back for just a little bit. When he was a kid, he liked to get up in the middle of the night and go out fishing. And he had a rowboat, but his parents would only let him use that during the day. But he figured what they didn't know wouldn't hurt him. He would get up in the middle of the night when the weather looked right and the water looked good, and he would go fishing by himself. Except for, I think he took a dog with him sometimes. When his dad found out about that, he made him learn how to swim. And so he learned how to swim. I met John in 1990. I left Northern Power Sports and went to work at Bend, Alaska, and John was one of the owners there. John had been an alcoholic. And for a lot of years. And he met this lady that he liked, and she was divorced from her husband, and she worked at Bend, Alaska, so he got to see her and see, you know, what kind of person she was, and he was really impressed with her. And he decided that if he wanted to try and marry this woman, woo this woman, he had to stop drinking. So he stopped. 1 year after, excuse me, the smoke's kind of getting to me. 1 year after he stopped drinking, he told her that he'd been dry for a year and asked her if she would go out with him. And she said yes, because she'd seen what kind of a person he was, especially during this last year. And they did. He didn't really say what they did on their date, and he said then after that he asked her out more and more and more. And she was very impressed with the person John had become, and he was feeling like God was leading him to marry this woman. And her name was Ella. And after a while, they did get married. And they didn't have any children of their own. She lost one that was theirs. But he had a daughter, or she had a daughter and a son, and they were just like John's own children. And they were older when they got married. Let's see. The younger one was like 13, and the son was 16. And so for John, those were his kids. And Ella was a godly woman, and she talked to John about it, but John never really committed to her, but she could see the changes that he was making in his life. And I met John, and we'd laugh and talk, and I really didn't get to know him as well as I wanted to later on. I only knew him for 89 till this year. How long is that?
43 years.
I'm not that old, am I? Is it really 43 years? That seems too long. 30. Okay, about 30 years. And anyway, we got to be friends, and he was kind of impressed by my work ethic, I guess, and I was kind of impressed with the way he treated people. He was really nice to everybody. I couldn't believe it. Because there's some people, it doesn't matter whether or not you try to be nice to them, that they just really don't reciprocate the feeling. And, I watched him, and he asked me to help him build his garage, and I did. We spent a lot of time talking, and, as we were working on the garage, and we discovered that we had quite a few common interests. The best way to find friends and bring them to Jesus is to find common interests. Do you know that? He may not want to hear about the Bible at first, but when they see, he or she, may not want to hear a lot about the Bible at first, but when they see how your life is different than theirs, how you have a more peaceful existence even when things are falling apart around you, that makes an impression. So anyway, we would talk, and we would, friendship is like sewing. You sew yourselves, you sew your hearts together. It's the way I kind of like to think about it. Because my wife likes to sew, so I use that so that she can see that I've been paying attention all these years. But our hearts were knit together, basically. And we got to be really good friends. And then he discovered that he had this disease. And the disease is one that takes a while to take its toll on you. It starts eating your arm muscles and your leg muscles and your swallowing muscles. Any voluntary muscle, it starts eating it. And it happens so slow. At first, you don't really know what's going on. You think you're just clumsy, you're getting older. But that's not the issue at all. And he told me that he had this disease, and I said, so what's going to happen? He says, well, eventually I'm going to die. I says, John, eventually each of us is going to die. And he said, yeah, but this is going to happen a lot faster than it might have. And then I was helping him at the Borealis building too, and I was helping him at his house, and at work, because he couldn't move as much stuff. So we had two guys that we were both grooming for our own retirements. He had a guy named Arnold talk to, who was still a good friend of ours. We had a guy named Steve Probert that I was grooming, and he's still a good friend of mine. But we were grooming these people to take our place when we finally decided to leave. John left before I did. In fact, about a year after he left, I left too. But I was there for a while, and I was preparing these guys more and more for the time when we would be gone. But back to John and I. So we worked together with a lot of projects. We both worked at Vendolasta. We would help each other make moves and stuff. If they were short a guy, I would most likely be able to go and help them. If we were short a guy, we would get Arnold to go with us. And so we really spent a lot of time working fairly closely together. But you know what? I never really asked him if he was a Christian, if he believed in Jesus. And finally, one time when we were at the hospital in the ER, and he was laying there gasping for breath, I said, John, I'm going to pray for you. And he had this mask on his face, and he would blink his eyes, once for yes, two for no, okay? Because he can't talk very good with the mask on it. And so I said, John, would you like me to pray for you? And he blinked once, and we prayed, and then I was putting stuff on his forehead and on his head to keep him cool because he was sweating profusely. And we prayed, and I was holding his hand, and he got better. And he was able to leave the ER and go into intensive care, which is a wonderful thing. And then he was able to get out of the hospital for a while, but he ended up going back again. And he went to the hospital, and they had him there for about a week. And I would go and see him every day, and I was doing stuff at his house too, just helping take care of his wife and stuff. And there was a beaver that they had there, and it was a cute little animal, but there was an issue because it clogged up the pipe. And so we would go and unclog the pipe every day. It was funny because the beaver ended up being better at clogging the pipe up than we were unclogging it. But the only reason we were unclogging it was because John was worried about water coming across and flooding his basement. So he went to the hospital again. We had to call an ambulance, and they took him to the hospital. And he was there for about 5 days, and they got him stable again. And then he called me up, and he was all excited because they said he could come home with hospice. And I says, with hospice, huh? And he said, yeah. And so he came home. And we would be there talking, and he would have to put a little oxygen tube in his mouth, the thing in his mouth, the tubes in his mouth, not the whole mask. And he would be there, and he could talk and stuff. He would tire easily. And the hospice people came by, and I was there watching him. He was laying in bed, couldn't do much of anything. I was watching his respiration. I was watching his pulse on his neck. And then about 11:30 on the 16th, it stopped. But before that, I had asked him, John, do you believe in Jesus? He says, yes, I do. I just I'm just not very vocal about it. And I said, I thought so. And I prayed with him. I prayed for him. He's my brother. I'd never really had an older brother before. But I really enjoyed my time with him. And the complete title to my message today: Have you considered my servant, John B. Alder? Excuse me. And he was a wonderful human being. He believed in Jesus. He had given himself to Jesus. I have every hope of making it to heaven to see him again. Our closing song today is Take Time to Be Holy.